babies, and I'm keeping everything crossed that I may at least be able to secure a camping site rather than sleeping in my car. Reaching out to see if anyone happens to have a tent, an air mattress, a small clothesline, any camping bits and pieces that might help. Before anyone comments with organisations or services to contact, please know I honestly have already reached out to just about everyone you could possibly think of, and sadly, I've had zero luck. At the end of the day, I honestly just want somewhere safe to lay my head and sleep.
It's 9:15 on ABC Darwin. That was a post shared on social media over the weekend. My name is Lara Stimson, and what resulted from this post was an outpouring of support from locals offering mattresses, camping gear, sleeping bags and help for her pets. But it also raised the question, why wasn't this person able to access local crisis accommodation? Annie Taylor is the CEO of NT Shelter. Good morning, Annie.
Good morning, Lara.
How often do you hear stories like that?
It's really common, unfortunately. 1 in 25 Territorians has access to a homelessness service, so it's a lot of people. It's a really common story across our urban centres.
And I mean, your reaction must be still the same every time, even though you see it so often to stories like that. Just it's distressing.
It's a terrible experience. It really is. And I really feel for that person. I hope that they got the assistance that they needed. And I do want to highlight that people shouldn't stop reaching out for support just because they've heard this awful story. There are services out there, and there are more than there have been in previous years because there is more funding now than there has been before. So please, if there are people out there who are listening, who are currently experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness, reach out. There is a centralised intake service as well now, so I can give the number at the end of this segment if that's helpful to people. It's a 1-800 number, and it's kind of a front door, if you like a one number that people can call and they can connect people to support.
Regrettably, though, and this poster, and she was anonymous in her post, seemed at pains to say, don't tell me to go back to these services because I've tried and they don't have room for me. Is that a demand issue? Because like you said, you've got more funding and more services available than we have before, and yet still this person was not able to find somewhere safe to stay. So is it just that there's even that money is not enough to deal with the scale of this issue?
That's exactly right. So basically the Northern Territory is under-resourced to deal with the scale and complexity of homelessness that we experience here. We have 12 times the national average rate of homelessness, and the homelessness experienced in the Northern Territory is incredibly complex. There's huge geographic distances, which means that there's higher cost of service delivery in the Northern Territory. So the money doesn't stretch as far here as it would in other jurisdictions, and that means that the funding it's not as much as what we need. So we're advocating to the Commonwealth Government to make sure that the Territory does get more funding in future funding agreements so that we can meet the required amount of services that we have here. But on average, around 29 requests for assistance go unmet every day, and around 9 of those are specifically for short-term accommodation. So 9 people are turned away every day on average. So that just shows that, services aren't keeping up with demand. It's important to acknowledge that they are doing wonderful work and in an incredibly stretched environment, but we just don't have enough funding. And the crisis accommodation that we have, the beds are really full because there's nowhere for people to exit to, because we have a real lack of social and affordable housing and a really tight rental market.
You're hearing from Annie Taylor this morning, who is the CEO of NT Shelter on ABC Darwin. It's about 9:19. My name is Lara Stimson, and we're discussing this social media post that was put up over the weekend in which a woman who remained anonymous was essentially asking for camping gear from people so that she could go and stay at a caravan park because she couldn't get into any sort of crisis accommodation in the Territory. You say 9 people every day, Annie, are turned away from that short-term accommodation. Is a solution building more of specifically that short-term accommodation look like in the Territory?
The solution is building more, but we need not just short-term crisis accommodation. We need accommodation and supports across what we call the housing continuum. So that's different lengths of accommodation. So yes, that crisis, but also medium-term accommodation to give people the skills to live independently and get back on their feet after they've gone through an experience of homelessness, and also that longer-term accommodation as well. So that's your social and affordable housing, and then exits into the private rental market. So we need to be doing more to make sure rents are affordable for people. We need to be building housing that is social housing so that people have somewhere to exit to, and that's going to mean that there are flows through that entire housing continuum. We can't just build more crisis accommodation, because what's going to happen? That's just going to fill up repeatedly, and then we're going to be in the same situation that people have nowhere to exit to. So we need to be actively looking at the entire system and building more across all stops on that continuum to make sure that we don't have those bottlenecks. And that funding needs to come from the Commonwealth, but there's responsibility that sits with all levels of government, whether you're talking about local government, who do some amazing work with assertive outreach to people who are sleeping rough on the streets in and around Darwin, or you're looking at the NT government, who can be providing land to community housing providers to build social and affordable housing, or the Commonwealth government, who provides a lot of the funding to our homelessness services.
Annie, that number for people to contact is 1800 920 333. My esteemed producers have dug it up for me. For people who can't get accommodation, perhaps on the first try, is that a number that they should just continue to call?
Yes, definitely. But that phone number should be picked up. Otherwise, people can leave a message. Again, it's a one-stop shop. It's run by Lutheran Care. It's a new service called the Central Intake Service, and they'll be able to connect you with supports or accommodation, acknowledging that sometimes accommodation is full. So it's about what can they do to connect people to supports. This person in this poster in the social media group also mentioned having pets, and I think it's important to note that people should still reach out to homelessness services and the Central Intake Service if they have pets, because it's important to ask what options exist, because sometimes there's temporary care arrangements and MOUs that services have with various pet care organisations. So there are still options for people. Unfortunately, this poster didn't find an option for themselves, but please continue to reach out.
Annie, I appreciate you sharing your expertise on this morning, and we'll stay in touch. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
That's Annie Taylor, who is the CEO of NT Shelter. It's a really heartbreaking story, and regrettably an all too common one in the Northern Territory. It's